Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the very heart of ancient Rome, not to stand among emperors or senators, but to slip into the worn sandals of someone you've probably never heard of. You're not a general, not a gladiator, not even a baker. Nope, you're a bath attendant. That guy, the underpaid, underappreciated soul responsible for keeping Rome's luxurious public bathhouses running so smooth, you'd think Minerva herself scrubbed the marble. The air smells like damp stone and old olive oil. You're already awake. Of course, no rooster needed. Long before Rome's elite even stretched beneath their linen sheets, you're up. Your shift starts before dawn. Always. The bathhouse must be warm, the fires roaring the waters ready by the time the first nobleman saunters in, demanding someone scrape his skin with a copper strigil. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Seriously, I love seeing the global bathhouse we've built here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink away the final wisps of sleep as you trudge through the pre-dawn mist. Your tunic is stiff with yesterday's steam and soot. You've got your toolkit slung over one shoulder, oil flask strigil, 2 cracked tiles you've repurposed as fire tongs, and a pouch of crushed laurel leaves to mask the smell of burning rodent. Don't ask. Just don't. The bathhouse looms ahead. Massive stone walls, tiled roofs, and a statue of Hercules at the front that always seems to be judging you. You nod to the night guard who's already half asleep against the doorway and step inside. Cold air hugs the halls. Soon, this place will echo with laughter, gossip, and that weird squelching sound people make when they forget the marble's slippery. But for now, it's just you and the shadows. You head straight for the Hippocos system, the network of brick channels beneath the floors that carries heat throughout the complex. It's your job to get those fires started. Again. Yes, again. Remember, the floors don't magically warm themselves. Rome may have invented aqueducts, but they still rely on your blisters to function. You duck into the boiler room. It's a low-ceilinged space where smoke clings to the walls like gossip to a senator's wife. You kneel by the furnace, coaxing the embers from yesterday's ash. The logs go in one by one, layered like lasagna, except instead of pasta and cheese, it's char and sap. Historians still argue whether bath attendants like you were slaves, freedmen, or low-paid workers with no concept of boundaries. The answer? All of the above. Some of your fellow attendants are former gladiators too injured to fight again. Others were born into this, like you. Your father stoked fires, and his father cleaned drains. You're third-generation hot water technician/human towel rack. The fire catches with a satisfying crackle. Warmth creeps outward along the terracotta flues. You move room to room, lighting braziers in the tepidarium, warm room, caldarium, hot room, and even the sudatorium, a steamy hellbox that Romans swore by for sweating out demons, or more realistically, too much goat stew. You hum under your breath as you work. It's the only way to stay sane. Some attendants swear by singing, others by silent rage. You prefer a tune, something soft, something slow, something to drown out the fact that your sandals are now partially melted because you stood too close to the brazier again. Your first small victory of the day. The natatio. The cold plunge pool is still full from yesterday. You won't have to refill it bucket by bucket from the aqueduct this morning. Praise Neptune. There's a moment just before sunrise when the steam begins to rise in thin coils from the marble floors. The light outside glows pink through the oculus, and the entire bathhouse feels like it's exhaling. This is your favorite moment. You're alone. The world is quiet. You almost forget that in 20 minutes, a legion of rich, half-naked humans will descend, demanding to be exfoliated like divine grapes. You check the oil stocks. Half a jug of myrtle oil, almost no rose, and just enough spikenard to make someone forget they smell like cheese. You make a mental note to ask the quartermaster for more supplies. He'll say no, of course, but asking is tradition. And then you hear it, a knock at the gate. The guard stirs. The noblemen are here. And with them comes your real job. Towels, water, heat, secrets. Time to work. You don't walk into the Hippocaust chambers so much as you crawl. The air is already dense and grimy, hugging your skin like damp cloth. These brick-lined tunnels underneath the floors are barely high enough to sit in, let alone move freely. You stoop, twist, and scoot through the maze like a human spider, except sweatier and with less dignity. The fires you lit earlier are now roaring their heat, radiating upward to warm the marble slabs above, where Rome's finest will soon saunter about like gods. That's the trick, isn't it? They never see this part. To them, the floors are magically toasty, the steam just right, and the air luxuriously moist. But down here, it's an oven, literally. And guess who's the chicken? You poke at the logs with your homemade tongs, a pair of cracked amphora shards bound with copper wire, and coax the flames to the far corners. The goal is even heat. Too much fire beneath the caldarium and you'll crack the tiles. Not enough under the frigidarium and someone will invent the Roman equivalent of a 1-star review, loudly complaining about it to 15 senators. The worst part? The smell. It's not just smoke. It's a heady cocktail of burning olive oil mildew, yesterday's sandals, and something that might once have been a rat. You catch a glimpse of a lizard black as charcoal scuttling past your elbow and straight into a flue. It's either your bathhouse mascot or a soot demon. You decide not to name it this time. Fun fact, Roman engineers were absolute geniuses when it came to moving heat. The Hippocaust system, which channels hot air through floor and wall cavities, is basically ancient central heating. Brilliant in theory. In practice, it requires someone like you to sweat out 4 pints of water every morning while crawling around lighting firewood and whispering insults at smoke. Historians still argue whether bath attendants received formal training in managing these systems, or if they just figured it out and hoped for the best. Based on your current methods, poking at embers and praying, nothing collapses. You're inclined to believe it's the latter. You shuffle into the corner beneath the sudatorium where the hottest steam will build. You shovel in the last few logs and pause for breath. Sweat trickles into your ears. Your tunic is damp, but you don't dare remove it. Skin against these hot bricks could blister in seconds. You've seen it happen. Last week, young Tullus tried to nap down here and woke up with a waffle mark across his back. He says it adds character. You say it looks like Saturn tried to brand him. Another flick of flame, another snap of wood. Satisfied with the heat balance, you begin your exit crawl. But it's not that easy. You've got to clear out ash from yesterday's fires, too. The bathhouse slaves assigned to ash duty are late again, which means surprise. You're the ash collector today. You use a flat wooden scoop and a shallow terracotta pan, trying to avoid coughing too loudly in case you stir up more dust than you can handle. A pile of soot clogs the western flue. You squint. There's something shiny sticking out of it. A coin. Bronze barely worth a crust of bread. But hey, it's technically a tip. You pocket it. One more reason you have the dirtiest hands in Rome, but also one more excuse to buy cheap wine tonight. You finally wriggle free of the chamber, blinking as your eyes adjust to the relative brightness of the upper floors. The bathhouse is coming alive now. You hear voices at the main gate, patrons arriving early. Of course they are. It's market day. Everyone wants to freshen up before flaunting their best tunics and faking their freshest breath. You wipe your hands on a rag. It makes no difference then. Use the corner of your tunic to dab sweat from your forehead. It also makes no difference. You smell like scorched pine and regret, and you haven't even touched the oil jars yet. You pass through the tepidarium, checking for floor cracks. The heat's working its way up beautifully. You test the water temperature in the basins with your elbow. Not too hot, not too cold. Goldilocks would be impressed. In the caldarium, the marble benches are already sweating from the heat. You give a final glance at the brass incense bowls hanging by chains from the ceiling. Time to light them. Nothing says Roman luxury like frankincense and myrrh, choking your nostrils while your pores cry for mercy. As the first wisps of scent coil into the warm air, you pause. Take a breath. It's the last moment of quiet you'll get for hours. The bathhouse is ready. The fires are set. The walls are warming. The pools shimmer faintly in the shifting light. And your spine, It already wants to retire to the countryside. The moment the gates creak open, your entire demeanor shifts. Gone is the soot-covered goblin who just spent an hour belly-crawling through fire tunnels. Now, you're upright, smiling kind of, and armed with a stack of folded linen towels that smell only slightly like damp amphora. The patrons always arrive in waves. First, the regulars, aging senators who believe loudly in the healing power of steam, followed by junior scribe soldiers on leave, and one man who always claims he's friends with Cicero, even though Cicero has been dead for decades. Then come the merchants newly rich and eager to rub elbows with Rome's finest, literally in the warm pools. And finally, your least favorite group, the chaos contingent. This includes upper-class teenagers playing toga-tag older men with more opinions than hygiene, and one very confused goat. You don't ask why it's here. You've learned never to ask about the goat. Your job now is all movement, directing traffic, doling out towels, and reminding people to leave their sandals on the designated racks, which they won't. You paste on your polite voice. Yes, sir, the caldarium is open. No, sir, we cannot add more steam until the floors stop literally sizzling. Please don't splash the senator. Yes, that towel is clean. It just looks beige because it's rustic. The baths weren't just a place to get clean. They were social centers, deal-making hubs, gossip arenas, and impromptu philosophy forums. Think gym, spa, courthouse, and Facebook comment section rolled into one, then wrapped in marble. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were truly public in spirit or simply reinforced class divisions. The truth from where you stand soaked in humidity and mild resentment is somewhere in the middle. Sure, everyone's technically welcome, but you've noticed who gets the softest benches and who gets told to come back later when the pools are full. You glance across the atrium. A minor noble is already trying to bribe his way into the private suite. Another man complains that someone's sandal touched his toga. Two children are sword fighting with strigils. You move fast to intervene, first removing the strigils, then hiding them behind a pillar before someone uses one as a javelin again. You juggle oil jars, towels, and the occasional personality meltdown. An old merchant accuses a younger man of stealing his cloak. You find it folded neatly next to the pool. The merchant apologizes to you, not the accused. You smile anyway. Your cheeks are twitching from it. You've developed a sixth sense for incoming drama. The twitch of a noble's eyebrow. The hesitant shuffle of someone who forgot to pay last time. The dead giveaway of someone bringing two friends into the private pool while loudly insisting they're definitely cousins. You pass a bucket to another attendant and dodge out of the way as a large man cannonballs into the frigidarium. A wave sloshes over the side, splashing your sandals and revealing yet another lost coin. You pocket it, again. You're not paid well, but the floor occasionally tips you in sestertii. One of the patrons, a toothless old man named Lucius, who's always naked way too early, tells you a story about the time he saw Julius Caesar in a towel. You nod and pretend it's new. He tells you this story every market day. As mid-morning hits, the noise builds. Laughter echoes off stone. Water splashes. Someone sings off-key near the caldarium. You find yourself humming in response, not realizing it's the same tune you used in the Hipparchos tunnels earlier. The bathhouse has a rhythm, and by now, you've tuned your body to it. You pass through the changing hall, straightening sandals, collecting dropped coins, and marveling at how many people forget which pile of laundry is theirs. You resolve once again to paint color-coded signs. You also resolve once again to forget that idea by tomorrow. Suddenly a commotion. A young man is shouting that he saw an augury in the steam, something about a bird-shaped omen appearing near the incense bowl. A small crowd gathers. You peek over their shoulders. It's just a patch of soot and a cracked tile. Still, you nod solemnly and whisper, "Neptune speaks in subtle ways." The crowd disperses satisfied. You roll your eyes and return to your stack of towels. By the gods, people are weird. You're about to take a breath when someone snaps their fingers at you and asks for warm rose oil. You suppress the urge to pour it over their head. Instead, you bow slightly, disappear behind a pillar count to 10, and return with exactly what they asked for, plus a slightly thinner smile. There are good moments too. A boy thanks you for finding his father's lost ring. An older woman leaves a fig cake near your bench. You pretend not to see her sneak it there. Little gestures like these remind you that you're not invisible. Just nearly so. The doors are still open. The rush isn't over. But for now, the systems are working. The fires are steady, and nobody has slipped on the soap tiles yet. Give it another 5 minutes. Oil sweat and a lot of back hair, that's the next phase of your day. You take a deep breath, instantly regrettable, and ready yourself for the most hands-on part of your duties, the strigil service. The patrons begin lining up near the apoditerium, stripping off togas with the same casual entitlement they'd display when throwing coins to a beggar. You retrieve the jar of warmed olive oil from its cradle in the brazier and carry it over. It's thick, fragrant, and suspiciously low. You'll have to water it down later. Again. You begin with the usual, a splash of oil across the shoulders, a gentle massage to spread it evenly. The rich like to claim it's for health. The poor pretend it's for cleanliness. But let's be honest, it's mostly a flex. There's something profoundly Roman about paying someone else to rub oil on you just so they can scrape it back off moments later. With the oil applied, you grab your strigil, a curved metal blade, usually bronze, occasionally iron, and always too cold for comfort. You announce what's coming. Hold still. The scraping begins. It starts on the arms, works across the back down to the legs. The goal is to remove sweat grime and dead skin. The side effect: you get a front row seat to every scar, mole, and weird tattoo in Rome. There's an eagle that looks like a duck, a lover's name scratched out and replaced with a slightly misspelled version of another, and one merchant whose entire back is covered in what looks like a poorly drawn map of Sicily. No explanation. No one asks. Historians still argue whether strigil scraping was more hygienic or performative. You have your answer. It's mostly performative, especially when patrons moan loudly about how cleansing it feels while holding eye contact with passing strangers. And the hair. Oh, the hair! Romans weren't known for their restraint in body grooming. Some shaved everything. Others let nature take the reins. You once scraped a senator who looked like he was smuggling a pelt. The strigil made a sound that still haunts your dreams. A nobleman now gestures for your services. He's rotund, jovial, and already sweating. You oil his back, then begin scraping in practiced rhythmic motions. He talks the entire time. About politics, his diet, the grain tax, and, oddly, his charioteer's foot fungus. You nod politely while thinking about bread. Another man, leaner, quieter, tips you with a silver ring instead of a coin. You pocket it discreetly. He says nothing, but his eyes flick toward a nearby senator before he slips into the private bath. That probably means something. Everything here does. You move down the line. One patron insists on lavender oil. Another requests only clockwise scraping. A woman from the provinces asks if you can sing while working. You oblige with a soft hum, something half lullaby, half funeral dirge. She smiles. You don't question it. By now, your hands are slick, your knees ache, and your back is protesting like a Greek philosopher in a Roman senate. But the line continues. It always continues. You glance at your fellow attendants. One is scraping too fast and getting glares. Another is mixing oil behind a column, probably adding pine resin again. Rookie mistake. You make a mental note to swap oil jugs before the senator with sensitive skin returns. A fringe benefit of this work: you hear everything. No one thinks twice about talking while being oiled. They gossip about marriages, mutter about military deployments, and occasionally drop a scandal so juicy you have to pretend you didn't just gasp mid-scrape. A particularly drunk merchant slurs something about bribing a magistrate for cheaper fish permits. You pretend to focus on his shoulder blade. If true, it explains that suspicious pile of shellfish you saw earlier behind the frigidarium. The job has its moments. One patron gives you a fig. Another compliments your oil technique. A child thanks you for not laughing when he slipped earlier. You didn't laugh. You snorted, quietly. By the end of this round, your tunic clings to you in strange places. Your hands smell like rosemary feet and warm bronze. You've collected 3 coins, 1 broken clasp, and a small carving of Minerva someone left in the oil bowl. You clean your strigil in a bucket of warm water and lemon peel, an old trick to keep it from smelling like armpit forever. Then you sit on a bench for exactly 47 seconds before someone calls your name. Time for another round. You're halfway through your second strigil round when the real economy of the bathhouse starts humming the whisper economy. It's not about coin. It's about knowledge. Who said what? Who saw whom? Who's suddenly wearing a more expensive ring and why that might matter. While you rub oil into someone's shoulders, your ears are doing a different kind of work entirely. The bathhouse is a theater, but not the kind with actors. Here, everyone plays a role and no one speaks at full volume. You pass between benches, oil sloshing, and pick up fragments. A grain shortage outside Ostia, a magistrate's wife having her third cousin visit this week, a general who may or may not be returning with fewer troops than he left with. Historians still argue whether bathhouses served as actual hubs of state-level intrigue, or if these places merely amplified city gossip. You know better. A well-timed overheard whisper here can change careers or end them. You pretend to be too busy arranging towels to notice that two men by the steam basin are speaking in Latin, far too polished for fishmongers. One of them wears a ring with a dolphin insignia naval fleet. The other has sandaled feet far too clean for a merchant. Military. Likely. The one with the dolphin ring murmurs something about Numidia. You file it away. Even the bathhouse architecture helps these conversations flourish. The domed ceilings echo. The thick walls hide quiet voices. Curtains ripple between chambers, offering half privacy that somehow invites more honesty. You once watched two senators sit side by side for 30 minutes without speaking, then mutter 3 sentences at the end that led to a 3-week market delay in the forum, all because of grain tariffs or possibly someone's nephew. It's always someone's nephew. You're careful never to repeat what you hear. Not out loud. That's the trick. Let the patrons feel safe. Let them imagine you're nothing but hands and towels and oil. Then later, when needed, you trade knowledge, like others trade coin. Case in point, you catch sight of Helena again, one of the wealthier women who frequents the baths. Not just for cleanliness, but for influence. She tips well. She also has ears sharper than a lawyer's, and a smile that makes even aging generals straighten their spines. You nod respectfully. She nods back. The pact is understood. She once gifted you a small vial of imported myrrh oil. In return, you once gently forgot to mention that her husband had met someone by the caldarium the day before. Mutual silence. That's the real coin here. You adjust a nearby incense bowl, letting the smoke rise in a slow ribbon more for effect than aroma. The scent, a blend of crushed cedar and wormwood, masks the musty stone smell and gives people the illusion of control. Smells have power. You've seen arguments fizzle simply because the room started smelling like cypress. A young man approaches you now, face pale, eyes darting. He asks for rose oil, then drops his voice and adds, "Is he here today?" You glance discreetly toward the frigidarium and nod once. He mutters a curse, then backs away like he's seen a ghost. You have no idea who he is, but now you know to watch. The bathhouse changes with the hour. Morning was for activity. Now, as the sun climbs, the energy gets heavier, slower, sweatier, more secretive. Patrons linger longer. Some nap on benches. Others whisper beneath towels. A pair of older women argue in Greek near the hot pool. You catch only a few words. Inheritance, cousin, and dishonorable. You offer them a fresh towel and are waved away like smoke. You pass through the changing room just as a merchant loudly proclaims his sandals were stolen again. You find them tucked neatly beneath the bench. He thanks you by shoving a nearly rotted date in your hand. You later give it to the bathhouse cat, who sniffs it and walks away insulted. You head back toward the atrium and find yourself near 2 scribes discussing a speech draft for the next Senate meeting. They argue about wording auctoritas versus potestas. One of them gestures with his wet sandal and nearly knocks over an oil jar. You catch it midair and place it down calmly, silently, earning the title of Most Underappreciated Reflexes in Rome. Not all whispers are dramatic. One man murmurs about a new bakery with honeyed bread. Another discusses his daughter's engagement and the price of goats. But it all matters. You're not just memorizing conversations. You're building a living, breathing map of the city's shifting currents. And sometimes knowing the cost of goats is important. You brush past the colonnade where a poet sits scribbling verses onto wax tablets. He's here often. He claims the steam helps his metaphors rise. You once corrected his Latin declension. He gave you a dirty look, then used it in his next poem. The crowd is thick now. Voices ricochet across stone. Secrets swirl in the mist. And you keep walking, listening, nodding. You're not paid to listen, but you do anyway. Cleaning the dirty clean. There's irony in that phrase, and it defines the next exhausting block of your day. The baths are full now, buzzing with patrons in various states of nudity and self-importance. The marble gleams, but only because you and your fellow attendants keep it from descending into the chaos of sloshed wine-smeared oil and whatever that greenish goo was in the frigidarium yesterday. You start with the outer benches, stone seating that's supposed to give visitors a place to recline, socialize, and contemplate their greatness. In reality, these benches accumulate olive oil drips, damp towels, half-eaten dates, and one alarmingly squashed fig. You grab your bucket of lemon water and scrub with a rough linen cloth, the citrus doing its best to mask the smell of old sweat and sandal grime. Today, someone left behind a full amphora of watered wine. You sniff it, definitely more water than wine. You pour it out behind a pillar. You're not risking someone slipping and blaming the spirits again. Nearby, a young man is loudly boasting about his recent athletic victory in the palestra. You glance over and recognize him as the same guy who last week pulled a muscle lifting a water jug. He's flexing for a group of admirers who clearly didn't see him cry afterward. You mop around them carefully, pretending not to hear the story for the third time. Then the real fun starts. Someone has vomited in the corner of the tepidarium. You sigh. It's always the tepidarium. Something about the lukewarm air, the heavy food, and egos exceeding stomach capacity. You grab your worst rag, the one already stained with ancient crimes, douse it in vinegar, and scrub the floor while breathing through your mouth. A fellow attendant gives you a sympathetic look. He once cleaned an entire frigidarium after a toga party ended in goat stew and poor decisions. Historians still argue whether bathhouses maintained any kind of sanitation standard. Some claim they were remarkably clean for their time. Others describe them as disease-ridden cesspools. From your vantage point, it's both. They're spotless by mid-morning, and a biological battlefield by late afternoon. You rinse the rag, dump the bucket, and grab your broom. This isn't some delicate whisk of straw. It's a massive, splintery beast of a broom taller than you, and twice as stubborn. You use it to sweep out debris from beneath benches, and into a corner pile that seems to grow with sentient malice. Bits of reed sandals, olive pits, a wax tablet with half a love poem, a dead mouse. You flick that into the bin with practiced aim. Next, the drains. Roman bathhouses had surprisingly advanced plumbing, including drainage channels beneath the floors and out through the walls. You, however, are the one who has to remove the clogs. You kneel beside a grate near the caldarium and lift the stone cover, revealing a sludge pit so foul it could probably vote in the next magistrate election. You fish out a wad of hair, a soggy piece of bread, and what you're pretty sure used to be a sandal. You clear the pipe with a hooked rod and let the water flow again, grateful that at least today it's not bubbling back up. A shriek from the apoditerium alerts you to another crisis, someone's missing tunic. You rush in to find a pale, furious merchant standing with only a towel and a very bad attitude. He accuses 3 people in the room of theft. One is an old man, another is asleep, and the third is a child holding a fig. You check the shelves. Sure enough, his tunic is draped neatly on a hook 2 rows over. You hand it to him with a polite smile and no comment. He grumbles something about sabotage and marches off like he just won a trial. You move back toward the pools to check for spills. A few attendants are already there, dabbing up oil from the water's edge with strips of linen. It's slippery, dangerous, and oddly satisfying when the cloths come away black with grime. The patrons don't notice, or maybe they do and choose to pretend it's part of the ambiance. You pass a pair of musicians packing up their lyres. They were hired by someone for ambiance, and now smell like wet papyrus. One of them offers you a candied date. You accept. Small kindnesses are your currency. The rest of your tasks are the usual parade of absurdity. Someone insists their towel was softer yesterday. Someone else swears the incense in the caldarium is making them hallucinate. It's just wormwood and boredom. A child gets their toe stuck in a drain. You free it with olive oil and a gentle tug. A noble woman drops her bracelet into the hot pool and demands you retrieve it. You strip to your tunic weighed in, burn your shin on a hidden brazier pipe. Find the bracelet, cheap bronze by the way, and hand it over with a flourish. She doesn't thank you, but her servant slips a fig into your pouch when no one's looking. You drag the rag bin back into the storeroom and pause. Your arms ache. Your back stings. Your nose no longer registers scent as a concept, but you've survived the worst of it until evening at least. You lean against the storeroom wall for a breath, and then someone knocks over the oil rack. Of course they do. You're not technically allowed to sit in the caldarium as a bath attendant, but sometimes rules exist only to be very, very quietly ignored, especially when no one's watching, especially when your spine feels like it's been folded and ironed. So you slip in, just for 5 minutes. The steam hits you first, dense, humid, and perfumed with thyme and bay leaf. It wraps around your head like a pillow that forgot how to breathe. You perch on the edge of the marble bench, careful not to leave butt prints on the clean tiles, and let yourself exhale. It's the only time all day your shoulders drop lower than your ears. The caldarium is empty save for a few flickering brass oil lamps that cast dancing shadows across the walls. The domed ceiling catches each drip of condensation with a wet plink, and you watch one build on the edge of a carved arch before it falls and disappears into the mist. You smell faint traces of cedar smoke and someone's leftover citrus-scented oil. It's almost calming. Almost. You close your eyes for 1 second too long and jolt awake when your head dips forward. Nope, not today. You're not getting caught dozing like young Tiberius last week, who snored loud enough in the steam room to startle a noblewoman and got reassigned to latrine duty for a fortnight. Historians still argue whether Roman bath attendants were allowed any downtime at all. Some mosaics show them resting or chatting. Others depict them endlessly working, scraping backs, pouring oil, dragging amphorae. You suspect it depended on the bathhouse, the supervisor, and whether said supervisor had had their own oil rub that morning. Just as your breathing evens, you hear footsteps. Fast, sharp ones. You rise instantly. Gone is the tired attendant soaking in a stolen moment of heat. You wipe your brow, grab your rag, and begin vigorously polishing a bench that's already gleaming. A figure appears through the steam. It's Brutus, the assistant to the quartermaster, whose job seems to consist entirely of appearing when you're breaking rules and writing things in a wax tablet. He gives you a look. You give him a grin. He frowns and walks on. You wait a few moments before slipping out the side passage and into the tepidarium, where at least you can pretend to be inspecting the tile temperature. Which, to be fair, you do. You press your hand to the wall perfectly warm. No signs of cracking. No mildew pooling in the corners. You nod like a master architect. No one questions someone nodding with confidence while sweaty. You catch your reflection in a bronze mirror. Your tunic is damp in all the wrong places. Your face is streaked with soot smudges from earlier, and there's a leaf in your hair. You remove it. You leave the soot? Consider it camouflage. Back in the atrium, someone asks for more hot water in the laconicum. The dry, sweating room. You stifle a sigh and lug the bronze bucket toward the rear cistern. A small herd of teenagers, sons of merchants pretending to be senators, blocks the path, giggling over a pigeon that somehow made its way into the ceiling. You navigate around them, avoiding their thrown fig pits and half-clever jokes about each other's sandals. You pour the hot water over the heater stones in the laconicum, creating a hiss of fresh steam. The air thickens instantly. You hold your breath too much of that, and you'll be lightheaded for an hour. Sometimes you wonder what it's like to actually use the bathhouse. To arrive clean and leave cleaner. To get rubbed down with saffron oil and not wonder who diluted it. To lounge for hours without having to refill a single incense dish. But that's not your place. Not today. Maybe not ever. Still, it's not all bad. A boy gives you a polished pebble he found in the frigidarium as a gift. You thank him and place it in your pouch, next to 3 copper coins, a sprig of rosemary, and a wax tablet note that reads, "Tell Helena yes, he was here." As the sun slants through the high windows, the golden light filters through steam, like honey poured through mist. It touches the mosaics, the sweating walls, the curve of the marble pools. For a second, the bathhouse looks like Olympus, minus the plumbing issues. Then someone drops an amphora and starts yelling about cursed pottery. The spell breaks. You're back on your feet, back to the grind, back to being the invisible hand that keeps everything from slipping literally and socially. You take one last glance back at the caldarium. It'll be waiting for you again tomorrow, maybe for 6 minutes next time. Midday has arrived, and with it comes the kind of chaos that makes you consider faking your own death and fleeing to Britannia. You can always say you were taken by pirates. It'd be less stressful. This is the hour of towel crises and tunic confusion. Patrons are exiting the pools, now slick with oil pink from steam, and wildly incapable of remembering where they left their clothes. You are immediately besieged by 6 dripping citizens asking where their sandals went. You point them toward the shelves. They look, return, and ask again. You resist the urge to suggest they try wearing name tags next time. You distribute towels like offerings from the gods, some clean, some only slightly damp from previous returns. You try not to mix them up. You fail once. A merchant glares at you after sniffing his linen. You bow apologetically. He mutters something about standard slipping since Nero's time. You consider handing him the goat's towel next time. Then it begins. The stolen tunic incident. A frantic woman bursts from the apoditerium wrapped in nothing but a towel and vengeance. She declares her tunic missing, insists it was silk imported from Alexandria, and begins accusing every other woman in the room of theft. The others deny it, pointing at each other, and bizarrely one very confused old man. You try to intervene. You check the hooks, the baskets even under a bench. No tunic. A moment later, a child emerges from behind the curtain, wearing something bright and flowing, dragging the hem through oil puddles and humming happily. Mystery solved. The woman thanks you begrudgingly. The tunic is returned slightly slimier, definitely not silk. Possibly wool, definitely local. Historians still argue whether bathhouse theft was rampant or exaggerated by dramatic Romans with bad memory. You know the truth. People forget what's theirs, panic, then blame everyone else. Usually you, occasionally Neptune. While you're still dealing with towel logistics, a new emergency arises. A man loudly declares that his sandal has been cursed. Not stolen, cursed. He claims it turned slightly to the left of its original position. He points at it. You blink. It looks fine. You offer him a new pair. He refuses. You offer incense. He accepts. You light a small cone of frankincense near his feet and recite a vague blessing involving Fortuna Mercury and the sacred rite of sandal alignment. He nods satisfied and departs. You add amateur exorcist to your mental resume. Next, you're flagged down by one of the wealthier patrons, the kind who oils his elbows and quotes Stoic philosophy while sipping imported goat milk. He's misplaced his scrolls. Big scrolls. Something about Cicero and grain law. You find them neatly tucked behind a statue of Hercules. He gives you a coin. A whole silver coin. You consider framing it. Someone else asks if the tepidarium is haunted because the air felt judgmental. You inform them that's just the marble echoing back their self-doubt. They don't laugh. You laugh, internally. Back in the atrium, an attendant knocks over a crate of fresh towels, sending them cascading across the damp floor like fallen doves. You rush to gather them, knowing full well only half will be salvageable. A patron watches, then steps on one by accident. "This one's dirty," he says, handing it back. You smile, the kind of smile that requires years of restraint training. Just as you restack the towels, you hear raised voices from the palaestra. The youth are back, flexing, jostling, arguing over who won a wrestling match. You don't care, but now one's shirtless and chasing the other through the steam rooms. You intercept them both with a broom and a warning glare. They scatter. You add bouncer to the resume. Then the best kind of break, a brief lull. No shouting, no missing towels, no cursed sandals. Just the hum of conversation, the hiss of steam, the clink of amphorae. You take a slow walk around the periphery, checking that all incense bowls are still smoking. No one's passed out in the frigidarium again, and the cat hasn't stolen anyone's sandals again. You pass a man sleeping upright against a pillar. You gently nudge him to make sure he's breathing. He is. You leave him be. Someone's left a basket of figs by the fountain. An offering. A thank you. A mistake. You take one. It's fresh. Sweet. You don't care why it's there. It's yours now. Midday is the worst and best part of the bathhouse rhythm. It's frantic and funny, stressful and strangely poetic. You see Rome in all its forms. Absurd, elegant, arrogant, generous. And yes, someone did just ask if the ghost of Caligula uses the hot pool at night. You assured them no. That ghost prefers the cold plunge. You've swept, scrubbed, and soothed half of Rome, but nothing prepares you for the marble-curtained mysteries behind the balneum privatum, the private suites. These aren't for the average bather. No, these are for the optimates, the patricians, the ones who glide through life, trailing scented oil and casual corruption. You're summoned by a sharp nod from the supervisor. That's all it takes. No one says much aloud near the private wings. You pass through a discreet arched doorway veiled by a thick curtain of crimson-dyed wool. The air changes immediately. Warmer, quieter, perfumed with something expensive, probably imported from Parthia. Maybe something illegal. Maybe just cinnamon. Hard to tell. The floor here isn't simple mosaic. It's polished green, serpentine, cool underfoot, and treacherously slick when wet. The benches are marble, yes, but covered in folded linen and dyed cushions. The oil jars are glass. You've broken clay amphorae just by sneezing too hard, and these people are lounging with crystal-necked flasks as if glass grows on fig trees. There are only a handful of suites each with their own pool, their own heating ducts, and most intimidating of all, their own protocols. Some guests don't want to be seen. Others want to be noticed only by the right people. It's not uncommon to find yourself walking in on whispered deals, stolen kisses, or a senator meditating aggressively to impress a poet. You enter quietly. One noblewoman, reclining on a cushioned bench, waves her ringed fingers without looking up. She's being read poetry by a servant who keeps mispronouncing every third word. You offer towels and pretend you didn't wince at his take on Horace. A small bronze bell chimes. That's your next call. The room you enter next is dim, the windows covered by heavy shutters. Only the flicker of oil lamps reflects in the still surface of the plunge pool. A pair of older men sit waist-deep, speaking low and serious. One glances at you, the other does not. You refill the incense bowl, lavender and clove. No one speaks to you. You don't ask questions. You don't make eye contact. You've worked here long enough to understand. Discretion is survival. Historians still argue whether these private baths were used for illicit deals or merely social climbing. You'd laugh if you weren't standing in the exact spot where a provincial governor just handed over a scroll, sealed with wax, whispered a name, and said, "It's handled." Yeah, just a social visit. There's another suite, smaller but richer, everything in gold tones, amber oil bottles, gilded towel hooks, lion-headed drain covers. You knock once and enter with a bowl of perfumed water. The man reclining there wears too many rings and not enough clothing. You keep your eyes respectfully down as he grumbles about the cost of Sicilian lemons and asks if the other senator has arrived yet. You lie and say no. He grunts. You leave. Then there's the hidden suite. Not on any map, barely spoken of aloud. You only go there when a wax tablet arrives with your name scratched into the corner. It's through a side door down a narrow corridor that smells of damp chalk and burning myrrh. You enter quietly. Today the door is slightly ajar. That's already strange. The curtain behind it, purple and black, is tied loosely. Stranger still. You step in and immediately sense tension. One man sits alone in the center of the room, mid-30s. Clean-shaven. His tunic isn't fancy, but the ring on his finger could buy the entire tepidarium. His eyes are focused on a scroll laid across his knees, but the way he doesn't look up tells you he knows exactly who you are and that you've arrived. He says nothing, just gestures toward the oil jars. You bow slightly and begin preparing the massage table. You heat the oil over a small brazier using the slow spiral motion you were trained in years ago. Not too hot, not too cool. He still doesn't speak. Then finally a word. Leave it. You set the warm jar beside him and back away. Still no names, no acknowledgements. You've done this before. Sometimes silence says more than shouting. You retreat to the antechamber and wait. You count the breath of the room by candle flickers. 7 minutes pass. Then the bell chimes once sharp, deliberate. You return. The man is gone. The oil jar is empty. The air feels heavier. You check the linens untouched. The water in the basin undisturbed. The only evidence anyone was here, a gold coin left exactly in the center of the bench. You pocket it and say nothing. As you exit, you nod to the silent attendant stationed at the hallway's mouth. He's always there when these visits happen. You've never seen him blink. Back in the main atrium, everything seems louder, rougher. A man is yelling about soap quality. A child is singing about Neptune's beard. It's all suddenly very mundane. You return to your linen bench. Fold 2 towels. Breathe deeply. The curtain to the private wing sways closed behind you, taking its secrets with it. You're barely back at your bench when it happens. The kind of request that makes you tilt your head slightly, blink once and mentally sigh for the 1,000th time that day. A servant boy approaches. He can't be more than 10 and hands you a small wax tablet. The handwriting is practiced sharp and precise. That alone tells you the sender is important. The message, suite 4. No interruptions. Bring the amber oil. Lock the door behind you. You look up. The boy is already gone. Of course he is. Sweet Ivol isn't normally in use. It's the deepest of the private rooms closest to the Prefernium walls. Always warm, always slightly echoey, always wrapped in the softest towels you've ever touched, and you're not allowed to touch them. The kind of place people use when they really want to be alone or unseen. You prepare the amber oil. It's thick golden and smells faintly of sandalwood and crushed orange blossom. Expensive, rare, rumored to be imported from beyond the empire's edge. Not the kind of thing you warm carelessly. You cradle the jar over a brazier and watch the flickers of fire catch in the golden swirl. It looks like liquid sunlight trapped in a bottle. Historians still argue whether such imported oils were common in upper-class Roman bathing or exaggerated in records by poetic scribes trying to impress patrons. You, however, have warmed enough rare oils to know. If it's overpriced and smells divine, it's probably real, and probably not paid for by the person using it. You slip into Suite A4 quietly. It's empty, at first. You close the heavy wooden door behind you and slide the iron bolt home. That sound, the metallic click, feels like the room exhaling. There's a figure at the far end standing by the water basin, robed but barefoot. You recognize them, not by name but by presence. You've seen them in the forum flanked by guards, always speaking low and walking like the floor belongs to them. Today they look different, smaller, coiled. They don't speak, just gesture to the low bench. You nod. Kneel. Pour a few drops of amber oil into your hand and begin the process. Smooth strokes along the neck, shoulders, upper back. Nothing too invasive, nothing too personal. Just enough to say, you are seen. You are safe. You will leave this room in control again. Midway through, they finally speak. Do you know who I am? You pause. Then shake your head gently. They exhale. Good. Silence again. The oil glistens on their skin. The room smells like luxury and caution. You notice something else. On the edge of the bath sits a scroll. Its seal cracked but not broken open. A name is faintly visible, one you've heard muttered by merchants in back corners and whispered by soldiers with lowered eyes. Politics. Dangerous politics. Then, you hear things, don't you? You shrug. Carefully. Neutrally. I need someone who hears things they say, but who doesn't speak. You finish the massage in silence. They rise. You hand them a linen cloth. They dry off, turn away, and when they speak again, the tone is different, colder. This conversation never happened. You nod once. Before leaving, they place something beside the amber jar. A second coin, gold, but heavier, Older. You don't look at it until the door closes. It's stamped with a face you don't recognize, possibly because it's not supposed to exist anymore. You tuck it into your pouch and don't speak of it again. Back in the main chamber, everything is louder, rougher. A wine amphora has tipped. A merchant is arguing about whether eucalyptus is too exotic. You can't care right now. You sit on your bench for a moment too long. Another attendant shoots you a look. You shake it off and get up. You walk to the nearest brazier pretending to stir the coals. You're just standing there really thinking about the quiet weight of the gold in your pocket. And the phrase, "I need someone who hears things." Congratulations. You've been recruited. You just don't know for what yet. And knowing too much in a Roman bath. That's either the beginning of a better life or the end of the one you had. You've barely shaken the scent of amber oil from your palms when you hear it. A hushed argument not far from the tepidarium, cloaked in the kind of restraint that always means something is going very, very wrong. Raised voices. That's theater. Lowered ones. That's danger. You drift toward it slowly, pretending to wipe down a basin. The sound is just clear enough now. A senator unmistakably arguing with a younger man. The senator's voice trembles with controlled fury. The younger one, too smooth, too confident, responds in clipped Latiny. You don't need to know names. You recognize roles. One man with power, another with information. The older man accuses. The younger man reminds, it's not a fair fight. It never is. Backroom politics in a towel, as one of your fellow attendants once whispered to you during cleanup. No swords, no shouting. Just one whisper and a ruined career. Historians still argue whether Rome's bathhouses were truly political arenas or simply rumor-swollen relaxation centers. But you know firsthand, this isn't idle gossip. This is blackmail. This is a deal being made over dripping shoulders and half-wrung towels. You lean casually against a pillar, polishing the same tile for the third time. The senator's voice lowers, then silence, then a laugh. Tense, hollow. Whatever deal they made, it's done. They exit in opposite directions without so much as a backward glance. You move in to collect the towels and find tucked under one a seal, wax, broken in half, a crest you don't recognize. You press it into your palm and tuck it into your pouch, beside the forbidden coin. That pouch is getting dangerous. Meanwhile, the steam room is filling with a different kind of heat. Flirtations rise like mist. A pair of magistrates are lounging too close, their voices full of double meanings and half-sentences. One gestures with his strigil. The other traces invisible circles in a puddle on the marble floor. Their wives, incidentally, are nowhere to be seen. You pass behind them, restocking towels, and hear one whisper, "Tell him we spoke." You don't know who him is. You don't need to. That phrase alone will keep you listening more closely next time they visit. You're so focused, in fact, that you almost miss the general entering the caldarium. He's hard to ignore. Lean, sun-browned with a limp that says, "Survivor, more than soldier." He carries a towel like a weapon and moves with the weight of someone used to being obeyed. He requests warm eucalyptus oil. You comply. He lies down. You begin the rub shoulders, spine, the careful parts. He remains quiet for a long while. Then he mutters, "There's no war coming." You nod, unsure if that's for you. "There should be," he adds. "But peace makes weak men, and I'm tired of politics in silk robes." He glances at you, and for a second you feel seen in a way that's neither comforting nor threatening, just measured. "I miss the clarity of the frontier," he says. You don't respond. Just keep the motion smooth. Oil glistens on his back like bronze armor. You wonder what this man would look like in a proper legion, not stretched out on a linen-covered bench while talking about peace, like it's an infection. Later in the atrium, a woman asks you whether it's true that Agrippa once bathed here. You nod. You don't mention that Agrippa also once slipped on soap and nearly brained himself on a pillar legend. Conveniently omits that bit. The woman laughs and leaves a coin. Not gold, but close enough. It clinks against the wax seal in your pouch. The weight of your knowledge is beginning to feel literal. You glance toward the doorway of the private chambers. It's empty now. Quiet. But today, you've heard the following. A senator being cornered. A magistrate flirting with someone who is definitely not his wife. a general yearning for war just to silence Rome's gossip. And they all left their secrets hanging in the steam like discarded towels, or you're not just scrubbing marble anymore. You're walking through a net of whispers, and whether you like it or not, you're collecting more knots than a fisherman. As you return to the basin, someone nods at you, an attendant you barely know, but whose eyes say you heard that too, didn't you? You nod back. No words exchanged. Just a shared understanding. Bathhouses don't have archives, but they do have witnesses. By the time the sun begins to slide down the tiled roofs, you've entered that dangerous twilight zone of the bathhouse. The hour of tired patrons' stiff muscles fading light and dangerously slippery floors. The crowds haven't thinned yet, but their energy has changed. It's slower now, heavier, like a toga soaked in oil. You move methodically, sweeping warm air through the side halls, wiping down basin rims and silently cursing that marble statue of Apollo with the smug smile and the 2 clean sandals. No one that pretty has ever cleaned out a soap grate. The marble floor is slick underfoot. You've learned to walk a certain way. Heels, soft shoulders, back eyes scanning for puddles, discarded togas, or upended amphorae. Today alone, you've caught 3 near slips and prevented 1 full-on comedy fall that would have landed a senator straight into a vat of rosemary oil. As you make your way to the apoditarium, you notice the shadows lengthening. Columns now stretch like skeletal arms across the mosaics. Everything seems quieter but not calmer, just waiting. You sweep through the changing rooms, collecting forgotten belts, wax tablets, a surprisingly nice sandal that clearly has no mate, and beneath a bench, 2 copper coins and half a fig. Into the pouch, always the pouch. Someone's left behind a tunic. You sniff it, clean enough, probably. You fold it and set it aside, then notice a small pendant tucked into its folds. A tiny bronze eagle with outstretched wings. Military issue. You don't know the rank, but you know enough not to ask questions. You pocket it. Not to steal, just to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The floor here is stained in places, mostly from oils and foot traffic, but there's a new spot darker, stickier. You kneel, dab a cloth in water, and rub. Wine. Strong stuff. Someone's been drinking in the tepidarium again. Against the rules. You'd report it, but the only person who enforces that rule is currently trying to talk down a patron who claims his beard oil has soured. Historians still argue whether bath attendants were permitted to take tips in secret. You can settle that one. Yes, because if not, you'd be starving. You shuffle back into the caldarium where the stone benches are now hot to the touch, and the steam glows amber in the sinking light. One patron eyes closed hums tunelessly to himself. Another is lightly snoring. A third face flushed, suddenly stands and proclaims, "This is the true Rome," before slipping on his own towel. You lunge, grab his elbow, steady him. He blinks at you like you're Mercury himself, then continues humming as if nothing happened. You shake your head. Continue on. Someone drops a wooden comb in the hot pool. You fish it out. A woman nearby asks if you've seen her sandal. You point to it perched on a ledge precisely 1 inch from where she left it. She thanks you as if you performed surgery. You pass another attendant sweeping the floor with stiff, methodical movements. You nod at each other, the kind of nod shared between exhausted people who both know the last hour of a shift feels like 3. You trade a joke, something about how even Minerva would trip on these damn floors, and for a moment it almost feels like camaraderie. Back in the storage corridor, you begin your usual end-of-shift routine, gathering the scattered items left behind by forgetful naked Romans who seem convinced their possessions teleport. You collect 4 towels, 1 damp one suspiciously crusty, a small wooden dice, 2 nearly empty oil flasks, 1 wax tablet with a crude sketch of a very specific statue, and a pair of sandals stuffed with more figs. You return to the apoditarium just in time to stop a patron from accidentally exiting in someone else's tunic. Again, you guide him to the correct pile and help him find his brooch. He tries to tip you with a plum. You accept. It's bruised but sweet. You're too tired to be picky. 1 final pass through the bathing chambers. You see Helena again gliding between curtains, her gaze scanning the room like a hawk in silk. She sees you. nods. No words exchanged, but the message is clear. She knows what you heard today, and more importantly, she knows you've kept quiet. As the last of the patrons begin to exit, dripping and yawning and thoroughly oiled, you reach for your broom once more, and just before sweeping the coins scattered near the cold plunge pool into your pouch, you pause. There, among the bronze and copper, a small carved figurine, ivory, a lion's head, exquisitely detailed. You pick it up, feel the weight of it. Heavier than it looks, valuable, forgotten, or planted. You glance around. No one's looking. You slip it into your pouch with the others. The day's secrets rattle quietly as you walk away. The gates are finally closed. The last of the patrons have drifted out into the lavender evening, and now begins the part of your day that truly tests your will to live. Night tasks. The bathhouse echoes with a new kind of silence. Not peaceful, just emptied. Like a feast hall after the guests leave and the spilled wine begins to crust. Every surface feels warmer than it should. Every breath tastes like baked limestone, and whatever scent clung to today's incense, probably marjoram, possibly mildew. You gather your tools, broomcloth, curved drain rod, and light your small lamp. This is when the place becomes yours again. You and the other bath attendants, the handful of night cleaners and the resident rats. And they are residents. You've named 3 of them. There's Legionnaire, who has a limp but impeccable timing, Caesar, who only eats figs, and Minerva, who once stole a ring from a noble's sandal and dragged it into a crack behind the caldarium. You respected her hustle? You start with the Natatio, the open-air cold pool. You kneel and scoop out fallen leaves hair and what looks like the remains of someone's scroll. Ink has bled into the water like wine into marble. You fish it out anyway. Set it aside. Someone's going to want that, even if it's unreadable. Then the drains. You brace yourself, lift the heavy grate, and prepare for war. The mix that greets you is ancient and ambitious hair oil, fruit pits of very dead insect or small frog, and something black that smells like shame. You stab it with your drain rod, wiggle it loose, and watch the water gurgle down with a satisfying slurp. Small victories. Historians still argue whether Roman baths had proper waste management. You snort as the water finally clears. Proper, sure. As long as someone like you spends 3 hours every night battling the unspeakable. A colleague groans from the other side of the room. Another sandal in the drain. He calls. You respond with the traditional reply. Check for toes. Neither of you laughs. You're too tired. You make your way into the sudatorium, the dry sweat room. It's hotter than Vulcan's forge even after hours. You pry open the vent shutter to let it breathe. Mop down the seats with a vinegar rag and pretend you don't see the smudged handprint someone left on the wall in oil and possibly figgy. As you work, your mind drifts, not just from exhaustion, but from the accumulation. Your pouch now contains 2 broken wax seals, 1 gold coin from someone who isn't supposed to exist, a military pendant, a carved ivory lion, and more copper than you're technically allowed to own. You could trade it all for a week's rest in a countryside villa, or be executed for possessing half of it. Depends on the mood of the magistrates. And then there are the stories you carry. Like the time you overheard a general planning to fake a defeat so he could rally public sympathy. Or the woman who visits once a week always alone, always crying in the caldarium, who once muttered a senator's name between sobs. You know things. You are things now. A kind of walking archive. A low-born ghost that slips between Rome's polished masks and tracks the dirt they leave behind. You find yourself in the frigidarium last on your list. The air here is crisp, the pool still. A single oil lamp flickers on a wall bracket. The flame casts soft, watery reflections across the tiled ceiling. You pause, just for a breath. A rat scurries past, probably Minerva. You salute her. Then you begin sweeping. You hum as you work low, tuneless, something your mother used to hum while folding linen. It fills the quiet, replaces the hours of echoing whispers with something warm, simple. There's a noise near the entrance, a soft click. You freeze. It's late. No one's supposed to return. You peer down the hall and see nothing, just the curtain swaying. You step closer, grip your broom like a staff. Silence. Then a voice, almost inaudible. Forget what you found. You don't see the speaker, just hear sandals fading into the distance. You stare for a long moment, then return to your broom. One sweep, then another, and another, because you're an attendant. That's your job. To clean what others leave behind, to carry what they forget they dropped, and to stay quiet even when the bathhouse listens. The fires are dying now. You kneel again by the mouth of the Hippocaust, but this time there's no rush, only the slow, deliberate collapse of embers into ash. The bricks are still warm beneath your fingers. The tunnels beneath the floors that once roared with heat now exhale gently like a sleeping animal. You feed the furnace one last armful of wood, not to burn hot, just to simmer till morning. A whisper of flame curls up, licks the edge of a charred log, and settles. The shadows deepen around you. You sit on your haunches a while longer, letting the heat seep into your knees. The smell of smoke oil, damp linen, and faint lavender clings to everything, including you. You no longer notice. Not really. Above the bathhouse sleeps. The caldarium is silent now, its marble benches slick but empty. The hot water still glows faintly amber beneath the surface, catching what little light escapes the high windows. The incense burners have long since gone out, but the scent of the day's stories lingers like breath on cold glass. You rise slowly. Your spine pops once, twice. You've bent over 1,000 backs today, but it's your own that hurts the most. As you shuffle into the linen chamber, you notice the fresh batch hasn't arrived. Again, you're down to 6 clean towels and 1 sheet that's more whole than cloth. You fold them anyway. Ritual matters. Then you take your seat. It's not really yours, this bench. It's just the one you sit on when the day ends. The others know not to talk here, not out loud. This is where the final thoughts settle. This is where attendance becomes something else. Memory. You empty your pouch onto your lap and sort through what you've gathered. 5 copper coins, 1 silver denarius from the poet maybe, 2 broken wax seals, 1 gold coin with a forbidden face, a military pendant, a carved ivory lion, a polished pebble, a bruised fig still uneaten, and a scroll fragment still wet from the pool. You stare at the pile. You don't know what it means, but you know it means something. Historians still argue whether bathhouse workers were passive bystanders or silent participants in the currents of Roman power. You don't argue. You simply lived it. Day after day, oiling, scraping, listening, remembering. You gather the items and place them in a cloth satchel hidden behind a loose stone tile. One of the other attendants knows about it. Maybe 2. No one speaks of it, but sometimes new items appear in there, quietly, like offerings or warnings. As you step out into the night air, your legs groan beneath you. You're exhausted, blistered, probably late for supper, but Rome doesn't sleep. Not really. Torches flicker down the alleyways. You hear the chatter of taverns, the shuffle of sandals, the low rumble of a cart creaking past. Somewhere a water seller sings, somewhere else a couple argues in hushed tones. You walk home beneath a sky scattered with stars. The moon is a soft smear of silver behind wisps of cloud. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your sandals are worn smooth. Your muscles ache, but your mind is sharper than ever, because you remember who said what, who paid in silence, who never looked you in the eye. You remember the secret suite, the whispered deal, the man who said, "Forget what you found." You remember it all. And in this city of echoing marble and gold masks, remembering is its own kind of power. Tomorrow the bathhouse will open again. The fires will roar again. The whispers will begin again. And you'll be there, quiet, moving, listening. The only one who sees every face, hears every deal, and leaves no footprints behind. Just clean towels, and clean floors, and secrets, always secrets. You're nearly home when the pain really sets in. The kind that starts in your arches, climbs your calves, and settles deep behind your shoulder blades like a squat Roman senator who refuses to leave. Each step echoes the day behind you, the scraping, the hauling, the sweeping, the silence. And yet somehow your thoughts still trail behind like laundry on a windy line unfolded unruly. You pass a tavern. Laughter spills into the alleyway, too bright, too alive. You keep walking. You don't need food right now. You need quiet. At your doorway, you fumble with the latch. The door creaks open, and you're met with the familiar scent of dust-baked clay and olive oil-soaked cloth. Not luxury, not comfort, but yours. Inside, the single lamp you left lit has guttered out. You sit anyway. Let the coolness of the floor soak into your bones. You unlatch your sandals, your feet. Thank you with a dull, pulsing ache, and you run your fingers over the inside edges of the soles. They're wearing through, again. You'll patch them tomorrow, or not. Depends on whether someone slips on the bathhouse floor again and sues Neptune for negligence. You stretch out on your cot, not even bothering to change your tunic. The cloth clings to you in the worst places, and the smell is somewhere between herbal decay and well-traveled amphora. You don't care. The ceiling above you is cracked, but tonight it might as well be the star-scattered dome of the Pantheon. You stare at it, remembering things no one else knows. The senator's voice tight with fear. The general's confession. The mysterious man in Suite 4. The words, "I need someone who hears things." You heard them, and you haven't spoken them. Not yet. A breeze sneaks through the cracked shutter, tugging gently at your hair. Outside, a dog barks. A fig cart rattles past on uneven stones. Rome breathes. Restless. Glorious. Exhausting. You reach beneath your cot and feel for the pouch. It's still there. The weight of the coin, the pendant, the seal, the secrets. They all rest silently against the worn leather. A kind of archive. A kind of burden. But tonight they don't press too heavily. Tonight you allow yourself the rarest of Roman luxuries. A full exhale. A closing of the eyes. A moment when you're not a bath attendant, not a walking ear, not a keeper of other people's mistakes. Just a tired body, on a softish cot, under a cracked ceiling, with the promise of sleep. Wind down 300 words. The night stretches gently now, long and slow as a warm silk ribbon uncoiling across your shoulders. Your thoughts begin to drift, no longer sharp, no longer burdened. Just soft waves on the Tiber lapping the edges of memory. Outside your window, the last torches flicker low. A faint scent of fig blossoms rides the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, the final clink of amphorae being stacked signals the end of market traffic. And in your home, in this quiet little corner of the eternal city, the only sound is your own breath. The aches in your arms fade dulled by the stillness. Your fingers, so often slick with oil and worn with labor, lie calmly by your side. The floor beneath you, cool and familiar, feels like an old friend. You remember the warm steam, the light on the water, the rhythmic scrape of the strigil, and the hush of secrets folding into the walls like breath into parchment. But now none of that matters. There are no towels to fold, no whispers to decode, no coins to gather, just the steady slowing of your heartbeat and the soft embrace of night. Tomorrow the fires will light again. The baths will buzz. The voices will rise. But not yet. Now let the marble rest. Let the water still. Let the bathhouse sleep. And with it, so do you. End of script. Sweet dreams.